Okie dokie artichokes. Let us finish the story. Okay. Slight recap. So, Catania has so far been to Balsacundus, has been on the red tier for multiple months, has witnessed the Blood Angels fight in multiple battles, and has watched Sanguinius fight multiple times, and has also seen Horus and Sanguinius speaking together and thinking about how the Primarchs are brothers. But he also likes Horus more than Sanguinius. Or at least that's what it seems like. Okay. Chapter 13. I decided to look for Elion again. Of all the Legion members I had met, including Sanguinius himself, he was the only one who had made me feel truly inspired about his heritage. He had been dynamic, vigorous, and none of the angst or gloominess that Belsepitus seemed to carry with him. If you could knock some of these strange notions out of my head, maybe I could get on and finish the work I'd started. As soon as I decided on it, I realized how hard it would be. Tens of thousands of Astartes had mustered for the engagement, with multiple planetary drops and extended missions. The very idea of going back down to murder filled me with trepidation. I no longer felt physically up to it, and in any case doubted I'd be able to persuade a military escort to go with me again. My main hope was that he had been recalled to the flagship, which was something that happened regularly. Squads would rotate frequently in order to repair equipment, patch up the wounded, and stock up on fresh supplies. Although there were now permanent forward bases on the planet's surface, most of those were under constant attack from Xenos, and so were generally used as staging posts for planned musters. I tried to get access to the command bridge level and was rebuffed. My remembrancer's pass got me most places, but not there. I attempted to contact Belsepitus, but nothing came back. The Keruvim were in action virtually the whole time, along with their Primarch, and so this wasn't surprising. I drew blank after that and went to the archives. After discussions with some of the menials stationed there, I went on a trawl of the lower level strategium cells, the places where tabs were kept on the movements of troops and materiel. There seemed to be hundreds of these chambers, some clustered together, others spread between different decks. They were dark, claustrophobic places, with banks of pictures lenses flickering in the shadows. Menials hunched over them, scrolling down orders received through automatic earpieces before transmitting them to where they needed to be. The chat from open comm lines was continuous. Damage reports, requests for airlifts, survey results, the whole panoply of a legion at war. Few in those places wanted to talk to me, busy as they were. I was sent elsewhere, or had doors slammed in my face, or was promised answers only for the cowed serf to run off after other things, leaving me hanging. Eventually, I managed to corner an older menial, one of the few who I felt able to hold my ground with, and insisted on getting some help. I was an imperial remembrancer, I told him, given warrant by the Primarch himself to record and document the Legion's every action. The menial, a sallow-faced man with a moth-eaten cowl and stubbly jaw, grudgingly agreed to run some queries for me. He limped over to a console, plugged some wires into jacks in his arms, activated a clunky-looking cogitator bank, and started to make inquiries. Elion, Tactical Marine, I told him. 7th Company, 9th Squad. The machinery clicked and jabbered. Eventually, the menial unplugged his jacks and looked up at me. No data, he said. I looked back at him a little startled. What do you mean? I mean, no data. I can't tell you his location. But that's your job. There are tens of thousands of warriors down there. Hundreds of squads. I can't give you locations for all of them. I doubted that. This was a superbly organized legion, one that prided itself on its attention to detail. Is the company still active on deployment? Is his squad? The company was recalled for resupply 2 cycles ago. It is due for deployment on the next shift. I have no information on the squad dispositions. I looked into the man's eyes. I could have pushed a little harder, maybe, but I had a strong sense I was wasting my time. I didn't scare him. Either he was merely being unhelpful, or or he'd been given an order not to assist this inquiry. Thanks, I said, giving him a sour smile before leaving him to it. This was an irritation. The longer I tramped down those long corridors, all of them bronze and gilt and smelling faintly of incense, the more my headache got worse and my innards flared. My fatigue was making my concentration fuzzier than ever. At times I even lost focus, and my surroundings briefly dissolved into a haze of gold. I went back to my own chambers, poured myself a drink, lay on my hard cot, and tried to relax. I couldn't. My head was buzzing and the drink tasted foul. I kept seeing Yakman Cruise's grilled features floating above me and closed my eyes to get rid of them. I tried to focus on what I needed to do. Clear my mind, get something finished, get rid of all the strange notions I picked up on this long journey through the void. I wonder if some psyker is fucking with him. Was it the warp? They said things about warp travel that it planted paranoia, that it made sane people mad. But why was only I affected? Everyone else seemed fine. I heard my breathing slow down, my fingers unclenched. I opened my eyes again and saw a stain forming on the ceiling above me. My eyes widened. The stain was pale brown, spreading steadily, deepening into dark red. I scrambled away from the bed, only to see the spreading pattern suddenly morph into a face like an ink blot test. A cherub's face made of blood that kept getting bigger and clearer. And then the cherub aged, rapidly transforming into a golden mask, one with ringlets and cheekbones and an open mouth. A clawed hand reached down, stretching the fabric of the ceiling panel, followed by a wingtip that dripped blood onto the sheets below. I started awake, panting heavily. The ceiling panel above me was just as it should have been. My drink lay on the floor beside me, toppled over where I dropped it. I checked the chrono. A few hours had passed, taking me into the ship's Noctis watch. I didn't feel refreshed. I felt clammy and disoriented. That was the best I could hope for now, it seemed, slipping into unconsciousness until a nightmare dragged me back into waking. I got up. I knew I wouldn't get any more rest. I brushed my robes down, disliking the sweat patches that my fingers ran over. Amid a ship full of demigods, I was degenerating, becoming the worst version of myself. I tried to work. I pulled out my notes. I started to scribble on my data slates. Nothing would come. I got up from my desk again, paced the chamber. Then I remembered Allion. I wanted to speak to him. For some reason, I jotted into my head that meeting him again would make me feel better. He'd been healthy. He'd been admirable. I could find him. If he was on the ship, I could find his chamber again. Why hadn't I thought of that before? Why was I trying to do everything through official channels? It was a brilliant idea. I was getting my energy back. I did the best I could to smarten myself up, brush the worst of the dirt off, brush the worst of the dirt from my jacket, smooth down my hair. When I looked in the mirror, I could see that my eyes were shining wetly. I had a thin layer of sweat on every exposed patch of skin. That bothered me for a moment or two, but I couldn't hang around to investigate. I had to be off. I had to be doing. Otherwise, all I'd achieve would be more procrastination and more bad dreams. A void ship during Noctis watch is a strange place. There's no genuine division between night and day, of course, but it's standard practice to make certain changes to reflect a nominal diurnal cycle. Much of the crew live on the ship their entire lives. If they didn't have some time series to anchor themselves to, they'd go mad. So they dimmed the lumens for a few hours in the deep of the false night. They reduced some of the non-critical functions in order to generate a vague air of difference. The interior of the red tier was always a shadowy place, with all that statuary and artwork lurking in soft candlelit murk. But during Noctis it became positively sepulchral. Huh, let's find out what that means, because I have no idea. S-E-P, fuck, U-L-C-H-R-A-L. Yep. It is something that is gloomy, dismal, or highly suggestive of a tomb, burial, or death. It is frequently used to describe a sad or solemn atmosphere, or a hollow, deep, and silently frightening tone of voice. Physical characteristics means that it relates to a burial. Mood and atmosphere means place or situation. Voice and tone, deep, somber, hollow sound. So, a voiceover artist. Got it. Okay, good to know. I walked along as confidently as I could. Menials were still about, padding quietly from station to station, and I nodded at them as I passed. I hadn't eaten for some time, and my head felt light. I had a whining sound in my ears that wouldn't go away, though that might have been tinnitus from the constant engine thrum. Scooch. Go. Could I remember the way? Elion's chamber was kilometers off, buried deep in the maze of halls and decks and access shafts. I'd have to take a mag train some of the distance, find the right elevator clusters to gain access. I wasn't very worried about being challenged. I'd been given more or less the rein by the Primarch, after all. But getting lost was a real possibility. I had to concentrate, but that was difficult, because the pain in my head was now acute. Water break. I pressed on doggedly, limping through the gloom and trying to remember where the turnings were. Paintings, half-lit, passed me by, showing flashes of faces and forests and mythological beasts. The marble floors glimmered, and the night noises of a half-asleep ship, the echoing clanks from far off, the murmur of a somnolent crew, resonated in the torpid air. I don't know how long it took me to locate it again. Maybe I was lucky and took a direct route, or maybe I wandered for hours. I couldn't tell. But I got there in the end and saw that the doors were open. That was strange. Whether he was on board or not, that shouldn't have been the case. I looked down the corridor in both directions, empty. A candle was guttering some way off, making the shadows dance. Elion, I called out, creeping closer to the open door. No reply. I edged to the threshold and peered inside. It was hard to make much out, so I let my eyes adjust. In the far corner of the main chamber, I saw the bronze bust looking right back at me. I walked towards it. Elion, I said again, though it was already clear that no one was in there. I saw no sign of any clothes, any weapons. The chamber looked like it had been half cleared, with only the various artworks and fixed fittings remaining. I glanced over at the inner doorway, the one Elion had prevented me from going through before. Maybe he was on the other side of it. Maybe a clue to his whereabouts was in there. My mouth was dry. I knew this was folly. I knew I shouldn't be there, and that only bad things would come from going further. But then I was almost moving automatically, tracing out a path that felt as if it had been preordained for me once I set off from my own rooms. Nope, there we go. I reached out for the lock release, pressed the lever. The door slid open, and a series of soft amber lumens glowed into life. A small chamber was revealed on the other side, virtually bare of adornment. Down the center of it stood 8 stone columns, each one coming up to chest level. On the square capitals stood more bronze busts, much like the one in the chamber. I walked down the line, inspecting them. Each of them was of Elion. I recognized the heavy Astartes musculature, the same set of facial features. I guessed he'd done all of them, just like the one outside. These were in a series. The first one looked similar to the one I'd already seen, though with a different expression, one of anger. I admired it. It reminded me of Primarch's face during combat. Then they changed. The anger amplified. The lips twisted, the eyes bulged. These ones were more than battle fury. They were some kind of frenzy. The fifth bust was beautifully rendered froth bubbles at the corners of an open mouth. The sixth had exposed fangs, pupilless eyes, a gaping jawline with cords of saliva hanging in loops. How had he done that in bronze? It was an astonishing achievement, but very disturbing. I only recognized the species. I barely recognized the species, let alone the subject. The last one was almost impossible to look at. It was horrible. What little remained of the human facial order had been entirely rearranged, a study in berserk abandon. The fangs were fully exposed now, stabbing incisors that I was sure I'd not noticed on any living blood angel. The eyes were virtually popping out of their sockets, the skin sucked in and withered. This was not a human, even in the attenuated sense that space marines were. This was the vision of a nightmare, one that had consumed the sculptor and chewed him into madness. I took a step back, breathing hard. I didn't like it in here. I felt that the heads were all staring at me. Any minute now they come to life, screaming. I had to get out. I couldn't breathe. My headache had my headache had become a pulsing beat behind my eyes, as if something were clawing to get out. I stumbled back the way I'd come, running down the corridor. I reached an alcove where a rather more serene statue of a Legion warrior stood, and wedged myself beside it, sinking to my haunches and shivering. Elion must have made them all. They were all self-portraits. Had those things really happened to him then? Or had he imagined them? If so, why? And where was he? Why did no one talk about it? I remembered the records I found. Ships going back to Ball, no explanations, no connection to the war effort. Had they taken him away? Had he gone mad? I heard voices and pressed myself back into the alcove, staying absolutely still, hardly daring to breathe. At the far end of the corridor, a lantern appeared. I recognized Wydera by its bobbing light, along with the man who looked like the menial I had spoken to at the cogitator station. They both went to Elion's chamber and peered inside. No one there, I heard Wydera ask. Empty. But he was asking after this space marine, you tell me, insistently. For what reason? He didn't say. I saw Wydera lean against the doorframe, as if wary. He had no business doing that. He's been ill for some time. Rat sickness, I think. I wonder if this was a mistake. Perhaps he should be placed in confinement. Decide what to do. Access to the Primarch, after all. The Primarch is due to return at the next cycle. Then it should be done before. You'll see to it. I can put it in train. Wydera shook her head sadly. I hope he'd rise to the occasion. This is my failure, I fear. Then they went back the way they come, and the lantern went with them, gradually swallowed by the darkness. It took me a long time before I dared to breathe out loud. My palms were dripping with sweat. So they wanted to lock me down to get me out of the way? That was only because I was getting close to some truth, some strange and unsettling truth. Wydera had, Wy- Wydera had always had it in for me. Always. Maybe she'd set me up to fail from the start. My books were too good. My brilliance overshadowed her. That was probably it. I think it's because you're about to tell the Imperium that the Blood Angels drink blood. forgot to do that. What could I do next? I couldn't go back to my chambers. None of they were now seeking to constrain my movements. I didn't have any allies here. I was on my own. I thought about trying to go back to the hangars, trying to get a lighter over to the vengeful spirit, but quickly discounted that. I was just as vulnerable over there, even if I made it. I had to stay hidden. I had to lie low. The Primarch was coming back soon. I could go to him. We'd spoken candidly. He could intervene, nip all this nonsense in the bud. I wasn't mad. I could just see things that others couldn't. He would respect that. Hmm. Well, I mean, he did say, yeah, Catania, you can, research whatever you want, talk to whoever. Taking a deep breath, I pushed out of my hiding place and started to limp along the corridor. Further down, I thought, the deep decks. That was the only way. I didn't have any particular route in mind. I simply knew that the Astartes were less likely to go down there, and so I'd stay out of sight, wait for my moment to find the Primarch. I scampered along in the shadows, listening carefully for any sign of pursuit. These areas were sparsely populated, and with so many warriors still on the surface, so wait. These areas were sparsely populated, with so many warriors still on the surface, so if I was careful, I could make my way down the stairwells and the elevator shafts undetected. The further the gloomier and more deserted places became, though the booming grind of the engines grew in volume. Hmm. I was wheezing all the time now. Everything was fuzzy. The edges of doorways, the halos of dim lumens. Dude, you're just hungry. You're hungry and you have a migraine. Have food and water. I don't know how long it was before I saw another living soul. I guess three. I guess these decks were never well lit, and the walls were like pools of splashed through puddles of liquid, brackish water maybe, or leaking oil. It smelled musty and confined. I narrowed my eyes, peering ahead into the darkness. I saw pairs of eyes blinking back at me, reflected in the uncertain light of flickering sodium bulbs. I took a step towards those eyes and saw huddled bodies uncoil and leap to their feet, clutch rags around them, race off into the deeper darkness. They were scared of me. I had no idea who or what they were. Surely not a regular crew. Oh shit. Perhaps the population who had been down here since the foundation of the Great Hole, eking out an existence entirely out of view. They might have been down here for hundreds of years, maybe more. I wondered why they were tolerated. I wondered if they'd been taken from Val. I lived after them, fascinated despite my discomfort. I doubted anyone had studied them before and hoped I'd be the first. Okay. So he's found their feeding grounds. It might even end up forming a part of my great work. Alright, this dude's just fucking stupid. I clambered over an open hatchway, grazing my hands on the rusty air seal, and found myself in a very long gallery. It was almost entirely dark, with a high vaulted roof shaped in a Gothic arch. The floor was greasy and reflective. The walls were ribbed with pil- pilasters. Oh, gotcha. It smelled vaguely like, with an undernote of something greasier and more biological. I couldn't see where the people had run off to. I could barely see anything. I reached into my jacket with shaking hands and withdrew a handheld lumen. After a few fumbling attempts, I got the beam to focus and swept it up and around. The architecture was very strange, torturous, friezes, and panels of intricate stonework, all black and glistening, with no easily discernible pattern to it. Like everything the Legion made, it was incredibly detailed, but the shapes were elusive, almost serpentine. I felt an enormous sense of foreboding, but crept further down the long gallery, relying on the little pool of light from my lumen to mark the way ahead. I aimed it downward and saw a single tread in the filth at my feet, the mark of a boot, far bigger than a baseline human's. I stared at it for a moment. So the legions of Astartes clearly did come down here. Then I heard a distant crash in the shadows, and it made me start. Probably something very far off. An engine shaft or piston or a valve misfiring. But it set my heart hammering. I kept on going, consumed now with both fear and curiosity. Then I saw it, the altar. It emerged out of the darkness like a ship slipping out of the void. Made of what appeared to be a single slab of some dark stone, beautifully ornamented, 1 meter high and 3 meters long. It was surrounded by a trench that was wet with an oily liquid. Above the altar, on the opposing walls, were carvings. None of them resembled anything I'd seen before on an Imperial ship. They looked Balite. They didn't look Balite either, to the extent I could judge. I could almost hear Yakton Cruz's grizzled voice echoing around me as I looked up at them. The Revenant Legion they were. I gazed around, my head close to splitting now, my throat dry. There was a man's body on the altar, lying on his back, legs together, arms outstretched. The corpse was naked, its flesh as white as alabaster. Its skin was withered, pulled tight to the bone, and appeared to be flaking away as if desiccated. The corpse's throat was ripped apart, like an animal had got at it. Runnels carved into the altar top ran away from the sight of the wound in shallow channels around the outstretched cadaver. Then out towards two receptacles of golden chalices. Those things were truly spectacular. Gold vessels encrusted with jasper and jade, glimmering softly in the deep dark. I looked over the rim of one of them. The bowl was almost too big for me to have lifted two handles, and saw black stains running down to the dregs. I pulled back, horrified. My heels crunched on something, and I looked down to see a snapped bone. I angled the lumen beam around and saw more bones scattered across the sticky floor. In the alcoves on either side were whole skeletons, some slumped into piles, some hanging from chains. I ran. I slipped on the bloody floor and ran. My sickness was now doused by my terror. The corpse on my leg had been the same, drained of blood, sucked clean, its flesh torn to satisfy some unnatural urge, and now I knew for certain that it had been done by them. There could be no doubt. Something was very wrong, something that had been taken with them from before the great change. Something that festered and lingered and hadn't been eradicated. I stumbled, slipping to my knees and sliding through the gunk on the deck. I heard what sounded like heavy clunks far behind me, echoing down the long nave. Echoing down. Where was I? Echoing down the long nave, and staggered back to my feet. I was panicking, hyperventilating, barely able to see. I ran wildly, my damp clothing flapping around me. Just ahead, I caught sight of a narrow opening, a slice of pale light amid the heavy darkness. I sprinted for it, my lungs burning. Everything was blurred, rushed, broken, and the engine noise around me had become a roar. But I still heard them, the boot falls coming for me, not hurrying, but heavy, purposeful. I almost got there. I saw the open doorway, maybe leading back into more corridors, maybe just further into that dismal maze of ancient madness. It wouldn't save me. I knew that, but I kept going out of instinct, right up until the moment the gauntlet closed on my shoulder and hauled me back. It was just as it had been on my leg. I was pulled from my feet, twisted around, held effortlessly in one hand like a bundle of rags. I found myself staring straight into the very same helm mask, with the very same markings and the very same burning eye motif. "I'm under protection," I squeaked ridiculously, a blur of sheer terror and pointlessness. The Astartes helm lenses gave nothing away. He looked at me for a moment, and all I could think of was that he was deciding how best to kill me. You should not be here, he growled, starting to march again. This ends now. I mean, he's just doing what the Primarch says. Water break. Dog's gone. Okay, let's see. We're on page 132 of 166. So probably like, I don't know, 14, no, probably like 24, 34 more, no, 24 more pages of chapter 14, then like 4 to 6 of the epilogue. Yeah, sounds about right. Probably won't be. And more fireworks. Chapter 14. I don't remember much of what happened immediately after that. I was virtually carried by him, I think, my feet slipping and sliding on the deck as I tried to keep up. We traveled down more of those interminable corridors, through more of those dark-drenched chambers. I caught sight of none of the underworld's denizens. Sensibly, they were staying away. Eventually, we entered a circular chamber, somewhere even deeper into the heart of the Red Tier's underbelly. The architecture was similar to the gallery where I had found the altar, though cleaner. A high vault rose above us, terminating in a red lantern that cast a bloody glow over the black metal surroundings. I was thrown into a seat, a high-backed iron chair that had been built for Space Marine dimensions. My captor stood in front of me. I tried to focus on him. "You are open, I said, my words slurred slightly. I felt feverish and exhausted. "Well, yeah, you left your house after not eating and not drinking. And you left after drinking alcohol." He just stared at me. He carried a sword at his belt, one with a cluster of jeweled ornamentation on the hilt, and I couldn't help but think he was itching to use it. When he spoke at last, his voice was surprisingly even. "You have the countenance of the Primarch," he said. "That is the only reason you are alive." "It's my job," I said, trying to muster a little defiance, "to document what I see. Those places should have been secure. I do not know why they were not." I could feel myself starting to hyperventilate again and struggled to calm down. He hadn't killed me yet. He hadn't drawn his blade. "What happens there?" I asked. "Old rights," came the reply, except the Ophanim, the Ophanim had said nothing. A second door had opened soundlessly, and the Primarch had entered. Just as when I'd seen him for the first time, he'd seemed to light the space up. A rose gold refraction glittered from the many fine points on his armor. He was unhelmed, and his long hair fell loosely across his dented gorget. My captor bowed to the Primarch, shot me a final inscrutable look, and withdrew. The door slid behind him, leaving me alone with my subject. "How did you—" I started. "I wondered if you keep going," Sanguinius said calmly, coming over to face me. I sat uncomfortably in the chair, wanting to squirm my way into its structure. Hey, just like I did. The Primarch's battleplate bore the scars of recent fighting. He must have come here straight from docking with the flagship. I wondered if you'd be able to resist the urge to keep digging. You could have stopped that. I could have done. You didn't. Sanguinius folded his arms, and I saw the great shadow of his wings rustle behind him. Do you not remember what I told you when we met for the first time? Record truly and without fear. I should ask you then, I said carefully, what happened down here? The Primarch paused, searching for the right words. A shadow lingers, he said, one we carry with us. He smiled dryly. You were right. We wear masks over that shadow. All of us know it. The populace of our ships know it. My brother Horace knows it. Anyone intelligent, I would say, must know it. And yet it is never spoken of. Why not? Because it is easier to believe in surfaces and harder to believe in the flesh beneath. It is horrific. I know. I can't get it out of my head. You are not required to. I pulled in a deep breath. I was scared still. My heart still beating too hard and fast. What was that the fate that awaited me now? To be bound on one of those altars, my body drained of blood and my mind emptied of its memories? If it was, there was nothing I could do to stop it. All that remained was to keep talking, the thing I always did, the one course of action that made the nightmare a little less real. My colleague, Jujita, I said, I think she worships you. I've been worshipped all my life. I'll be worshipped in the future, too. What do you think about that? My father is the most powerful being I have ever met. His abilities qualify him am- amply by most definitions I can think of to be a god, and yet he has always resisted it. If he resists, then I can hardly do differently. But it doesn't displease you? It's nonsense, all of it. Trust me when I say that I believe in the imperial truth without question. It was happening again, just as it had done when we'd first spoken. The fear was ebbing. My memory of the horror was fading fast, and I wanted to push back, to pry a little deeper. You cannot think that, I said. The way you talk, the way you are, you see things, don't you? You fight in a way that's impossible. You act in a way that's impossible. You see things before they happen. And you would know all about that too, he replied. You do not sleep, you dream. You dream so completely that the barrier between the real world and imagination becomes thin, and it feeds into your work. Thus, you sense your own true selves, even when we never speak of it, even when it makes you ill. He looked around him, glancing with what looked like distaste at his surroundings. We are becoming more than this, our species, a casket of wonders without precedent. The galaxy must be cleared of peril before these gifts can be used, and that is the purpose of the crusade. The alternative is to repeat the horrors of the past. So, what do you see ahead? I asked. Nothing definite. Fragments, possibilities, some rendered invalid by choices made, some subtly different when the march of time catches up. Then you foresaw this meeting. No, but you let my investigation continue. I told you to go where the truth took you. I shifted in my seat. The metal was strangely warm, as if it sheathed a reactor beneath it. I spoke to one of your warriors in his private chamber. He created visions of hell, of himself in hell. All the rest of your people are the same, I think. Tortured, trying to escape something, falling back. Only when you fight do you seem to be free of it. The curse was laid heavily on us, Sanguinius said. The Legion was cursed from the start, and in the early days they indulged it. No one schooled them any different, so they acted their curse out, let it dominate them. They satisfied their appetites. Appalling things were done, atrocities that should have never occurred. But who was helping them? Who was lifting them out of the mire and showing them another way? No one. Not my father, not Malcador. On the contrary, they were thrown into the worst situations. ones that would have crushed any force that did not resort to the message they used. They rose up time and again, never quite dying, never quite living, always shunned. You ask me why they carry the torture. Nothing has changed. The implanted organs are the same. The demands made are the same. Their blood is what always was. And that is what they open them watch for. The resurgence of the old. The cancer in the bones. The cancer is in the bones, but it cannot be allowed to spread. We are brutal with ourselves when we have to be, just as brutal as those who wish to destroy us. What happens to those who succumb? They are taken away, or they find absolution in death. The latter is preferable for all concerned. I remember Allion then. Is that what happened to the one I met? The creators of those visions? Jellybean. I didn't take a drink of water. Do you really think I would tell you if it were? So they had taken him away. He would surely have preferred to have indulged his madness on murder. I want people to think that I died well. What happened to those who were sent back to battle? What recompense could they make there for their weakness? There was great cruelty to this, it felt to me, a great waste. He'd been so vigorous, so alive, the most dynamic of all those who I'd met. But I guess the Legion had little choice, and was sure they took no pleasure in their means of containment. They were wrestling with a sickness that had shadowed them from birth, and only the strongest remedies would answer. For that, it made me despondent. I saw a corpse on this ship, I said. It looked drained of blood. I saw a corpse on Lilac too, the same. If your people wish to change, they have a long road ahead of them. For the first time, Sanguinius looked irritated, anger, perhaps, or maybe guilt. You have no idea what I ask of them, he said, his voice urgent. All of them. The pursuit of beauty transfigures the suffering. It sanctifies it, it transforms it, and still the old rages bubble just under the skin. If they lapse, when the flesh is weak, when they have already merited absolution 100 times over, thousands of my sons lie across the battlefields of 100 worlds, all for my Father's cause. Their blood nourishes the fields that will one day produce crops for an eternal empire. You have no idea what it is like for them. No idea at all. Sure, but many have suffered for this Imperium. His eyes flashed, angry still, and many more will suffer before all is done. But a cure will be found. If we will overcome it, we will overcome it. We will rise above it. That is my promise to them. As he spoke, I got a brief ghost of a vision in the darkness, just like one of my dreams, but waking, of blood angels marching in ranks of purest white, their red armor bleached clean, a golden seraph flying above them. The sun was rising, and pendants were snapping in the winds of a purified atmosphere. The torture was gone, and only the artistry remained. They had transmuted lead into gold. They had completed their alchemy. Then I looked down at my hands. The vision faded away, and all that was left was old filth. I cannot unsee what I witnessed, I said. You'll have to kill me if you want this to remain secret. Kill you? I thought I saw fangs gleam in the dark briefly. No, that is for the old world, and we are building a new one. His expression became almost mournful. Your colleague is correct, though. Images are important. Icons are important. The crusade must conclude. It must reach its end without being derailed. Nothing will be published before then. Once all is accomplished, we will need accurate histories, and you may say what you wish. I know that by then I will have cured whatever sickness still remains. We will have escaped the bonds that have bound us for too long. I looked back up at him. You truly believe you can overcome it? When my Father's vision is achieved, nothing shall be beyond us. Nothing at all. Why else would we risk so much for it? I thought about that for a long time. You're very complicated, I said, in the end. When I started this, I thought I'd prove that you weren't as impressive as your reputation suggested. No one could be. But now, just as I discovered the flaws are real, you turn full circle again. I have one great doubt, though. Sanguinius raised an elegant eyebrow, which is you. I tried to smile weakly, but failed. You're the architect of this transformation. Without you, all their labor, all their study and their skill will not be enough. It's a dangerous business war. Even the greatest can fall. I don't know if I meant that entirely seriously. Having seen him fight, I couldn't conceive of anything that could stand against him. But as soon as the words left my mouth, the thought began to crystallize, to firm up, to become something like a possibility, a concern, a specter of doubt. Was this the source of torment that I always sensed with him, just under the skin? Did this too worry away at him, despite all the surface invincibility? Sanguinius merely nodded. If I'd expected him to be angered by the suggestion, or even surprised, I was wrong. I do not plan to die, he said simply. It's a hostile world. It's a hostile galaxy. Not anymore. And the danger shrinks with every year. And that was when I got the last spike of real fear, the chill of recognition that he was dissembling again, that he knew more than he was letting on, and that he indeed had misgivings that he could never share. I have no idea why I was so certain about that. Maybe he was right, and I had some undisclosed powers of my own. Or maybe I just got good at recognizing the signs. But in spite of everything, the fury of battle, the corpses, the secrets, the agonized artworks, this was the thing that gave me the deepest pang of misgiving. So what's next for you when the Xenos have all been slaughtered here? I asked. I will consult with Horus, he said. There is already talk of us handling Chaos for them. Don't go. Sanguinius laughed. Don't go. You have a more pressing task for us, do you? This is a path that is unfolding without deliberation, taken at the behest of others. That is the way of the crusade. But you've foreseen something, haven't you? You doubt yourself, but it's there. Listen to the fear, just this once. I became more agitated. Go back to battle. You haven't finished your work. You could make that world impregnable, utterly safe from harm, ready for the completion of your designs. Sanguinius' laugh died on his lips. A look of deep disappointment came over his features. Listen to yourself, safe from harm. Not one of my sons wishes that for himself, and neither do I. He sighed. I have been surrounded by poisons all my life, but the very worst of them is doubt. Visions may be false, dreams can be lies, The only response is to march out to meet them. Of course he thought that. He'd been made to think that. I thought how many tens of thousands of warriors were on these ships, how formidable they were, how violent and utterly lost. Go back to Baal, I said feebly, knowing it would never happen. Complete the alchemy there. That is not how it works. We were not created to be content like herd creatures, safe in a pasture. We were meant to strike out, pierce the darkness, and we shall do so always. I looked up at him. I saw the severe beauty of his frame, his armor, his bearing. I'd wanted to believe that there was a flaw in it, something I could uncover and expose. Now I knew the flaw was there, and I had seen the grisly effects of it. But I also saw the quest to overcome it. Sanguinius had not come to redeem the Legion's affliction. He was the Legion's affliction, but he was also the only route they had out of it. The poison and the cure, bundled up together, impossible to prize apart. I'll write that down, I told him, all of it. The gold and what lies beneath the gold. He nodded. Good, he said. I meant what I said. Record truly. I bowed and resolved to do so. For as long as I live, you have my protection, Sanguinius told me, and thus you have nothing to fear. Planes are flying low tonight. Okay. After that, I couldn't stay on the red tier. I couldn't have slept in my cell, knowing something of what took place on the lower decks. I still didn't understand what rites went on there, only that they were lapses now, throwbacks to earlier, more rampant excesses. I didn't know if victims were willing, believing that they took part in some religious ceremony, or whether they were simply prey. It didn't matter. Either possibility was incompatible with the imperial truth, and would have damned the Legion if it were widely known. It took a lighter over to another. I took a lighter over to another Legion ship, one crew exclusively by serfs, and with no Astartes present. The Bowlight excess was still there, across the lesser ship's interior, of course. The obsession with decoration and refinement, but it was an emptier practice there, not a conscious attempt to rise above primeval weakness. The serfs found me a cell, gave me room to work, managed to have my belongings transferred over a day or two later. My headaches got better. I dreamed less. I even managed a few hours sleep. So perhaps the Primarch was right about me. Maybe it was proximity to him, or even his sons, that triggered the worst of my symptoms. The words began to flow. I described it all: the splendor, the martial prowess, the bravery, as well as the heritage of shame they hadn't yet managed to expunge. I described Elion's self-portrait, his descent into a kind of blood-fueled madness, and speculated on its cause. Most of all, I wrote of the great angel himself, his contradictions, his imperfections, the distance between what the Imperium needed him to be and what he actually was. So much remained opaque, even to him. I couldn't shake the feeling that his foresight was more of a curse than a boon, for all that it made him so deadly. He couldn't avoid his duty, even if he had some inkling that he was being led down a path whose end he couldn't see. As a weapon, he was like a fine stiletto, lethal but brittle, not because he was any way weak, but because so much depended on him. I thought of Wider's pictures and realized how it must have pained him to have his image reproduced cheaply in manufactoria or in army parade grounds. He genuinely had no desire to be War Master, to be venerated, and his pleasure at Horus's promotion had not been feigned. The Emperor must have known all these things. He must have done. Had he spared his most popular son out of awareness of his inner turmoil? Or, or, or what? Or was he more ruthless than that, seeing Horus as the more reliable of the two, the one best fitted to enact his grand vision? Maybe both those things, or maybe being the creator of the entire brotherhood, he knew even more than anyone else that some other factor was at work. I thought about changing the title of my monograph. Fallen Angel was one idea, but it was too close to my previously unlamented work. Dark Angel was another, but I dropped that for obvious reasons. In the end, I kept it as it was, the Great Angel. I couldn't separate Sanguinius from the vile things done by his sons. As Cruz had said accurately, a Primarch and his gene warriors were two sides of the same coin. The followers only aped the characteristics that their primogenitors gave them. But that was how I thought of him, a damaged, contradictory character trying to overcome internal flaws for the sake of those who depended on him. That felt more properly heroic to me than all the undoubted combat excellence. It made him more like us. He was playing the deck he'd been dealt, and maybe he would find a way to triumph using it. In the end, becoming as great as his propaganda made him. Of course, not everyone saw it like that. Wydera came to see me soon after she found out I had left the flagship. I could have asked to be kept away from her, I suppose, given that she clearly decided my sanity had been blown and that her gamble of employing her gamble in employing me had backfired. In the end, I let her come, as much out of curiosity as anything else. She didn't look angry when she finally entered my new chamber. She didn't even look resigned. She was just tired, I thought. You could have told me where you had gone, she said, sitting on the spare chair without my asking her to. I looked up at her over the piles of notes I'd made. I thought you wanted me confined. That made her start. So she still didn't know I'd overheard her outside Elion's rooms. Well, you were worrying me for a while. I worried myself. She looked at me for a long time, as if searching for signs of madness or stress. You look depressed. I sighed and pushed my data slate away. Maybe I'd hoped to fail, I said, and find that the illusion was as good as the reality. I can't pretend it didn't. It doesn't make me discouraged. It doesn't need to. She shuffled her chair forward, leaned her elbows on her knees. The illusion is the reality. It creates it. Believe in perfection, and we end up achieving it. You really think that? I do. There was a trace of fervor in her eyes then, and I wondered for the first time which one of us was under the greater mental strain. Think of what he is, she said. A man? No, not even a Primarch. He's an idea. And the idea is in the head of billions, each of them living and working and fighting. Would it even matter if he'd never existed? Maybe not. Not if the concept did. They fight for the angel, they die for him, and they keep doing it. The only thing that would stop them is if they had the idea destroyed. Nothing could do that now. I'm not sure. You write persuasively. The things you uncovered are dangerous. I looked up at her sharply. What do you know of what I've uncovered? She rolled her eyes. I've been with this fleet for long enough, and I'm not entirely stupid. You think I never went below decks? You think I didn't ever talk to the serfs on the gun levels? She shook her head. The only difference is that it doesn't matter to me. Survival matters. Getting out the other side, we need to believe. I almost admired her single-mindedness. I couldn't pretend that she didn't have a point. I read the histories of old knights. I told him I'd keep it under wraps until the crusade was done. I said, "You can relax." Wydera shot me a contemptuous look. "Too dangerous," she said, then leaned back in her seat, hands clasped behind her head. "You must destroy the work now. It must never be read." Now it was my turn to look at her with disdain. "You brought me here," I blurted. "You got me started." "Yes, and I regret it every day." I shook my head dismissively. "It will be completed. Everything I know, the Legion, its master, and there's nothing you can do. I operate under his countenance. For now." I laughed at her. "Oh, you think he'll change his mind?" Wydera got up. "Nothing lasts forever," she said, "save for one thing, the world we build. Some of us are already becoming its servants because we see beyond the immediate horizon. Primarchs are merely instruments. One day they'll be memories. That is what concerns me now." She meant every word of that. It made me more than uncomfortable. For so long, I'd assumed Wydera was captivated by Sanguinius himself, caught up in his real presence. But now it was clear that it had always been about the possibilities. She was enthralled, all right, but to what she could do with him, not what he was. The remembrancers were supposed to be the servants of the Imperium, the ones who meekly chronicled its rise to dominance. We were never supposed to shape that dominance. I didn't say anything to her. I let her leave. Once she'd gone, I looked down at what I'd been writing. I saw Yachten Cruz's words on the data slate. He'd been a pompous, faded old warrior, but I don't think he'd been wrong. What they are now, he once was, and what they were then, he is now. That had to be known, somehow, in some form or other, that had to be known. So I bent my head and carried on writing. Okay. I put, yeah. Epilogue. She rose from her desk, left the auto quill in its sheath, and walked up to the glass pane doors. Her body protested. Many things have been conquered over the last few centuries, but not aging. Not quite. A life could be extended far beyond the dreams of ancient humanity, but it came at a cost. At a certain point, every decade was a little harder, a little more painful. You couldn't go on forever, only as long as you needed in order to complete your duty. Her eyes weren't blue anymore. The replacements only come in brown, and her skin tone had grayed. She limped over to the doors. Her chambers were in the new approved style, the one that all construction seemed to employ these days. Dark stone, carved into gargoyles and bony ridges, high-pointed arches, spires, dimly lit, encrusted with skulls. She liked it. She clasped her withered hands behind her back and took in the view. It was night. Then again, it was always night, more or less, on Terra. The battles that had ravaged this world were centuries old, but still the weather system had not been fixed. Perhaps some people thought it should be a permanent reminder, a visible record of what the species could do to itself. She quite liked that idea. Make the entire world a monument, a shrine. An alert blipped on her collar. Skiva was on his, let's say Skevo. Skevo was on his way. She dismissed it. Outside, a billion lights twinkled in the darkness. Some of those were windows speckled across the flanks of habitation spires, each window housing tens of thousands of souls. Others might come from the construction machines that crawled like giant ants across 100 more building sites. They had turned the poisoned soils into materials, melted down the war constructs of the traitor, and fashioned them into scaffolding for fresh spires. The towers all looked much the same once completed, black and gray monoliths, festooned with grimy aquillas and forbidding skull friezes, skull friezes. The effect was numbing, even in the poor light of day. Rank upon rank of heavy intels and jagged pinnacles, like an army of golems frozen into rockcrete, but ready to march. She readied for the handle on the door, opened it. Hot, dry air wafted in, tasting of dust and exhaust fumes. She moved out onto the narrow balcony, one set hundreds of meters up. The view was commanding, kilometer upon kilometer of spire, all half-built and webbed with struts and cargo elevators. The old terrain that had been fought over so bitterly was buried under it all, a blanket of rockcrete and steel that kept the last remnants locked away and out of sight. She took in a deep breath, enjoying the smell of a world recreating itself. Hundreds of aircraft droned overhead, many of them belonging to the newly official holy orders. It had been hard work, very hard work, turning the Imperium's underground religious bodies into elements of the rapidly expanding Adeptus Terra. There have been horrific fights, some of them fully deserving the name of wars, between rival interpreters of Keeler's legacy. She herself had come to those late, but a lifetime spent with the legions had taught her a thing or two about negotiating dangerous waters. Jelly? No, no jelly. She reached. Oh, no. Wait one sec. She herself had come to those. Oh, wait, no. Always unfolding as it should do. The old nonsense of the imperial truth had been comprehensively erased from the minds of the people, save for a few holdouts of Adeptus Astartes, whose grip over the Imperium had in any case been loosened following the Codex reforms. No one now doubted that the Emperor was a god, and no one now doubted that his divinity was all that stood between them and a repeat of the great heresy. The foundations had been laid and were now being rapidly built upon all of the same industry that raised the physical spires around them. It was just as she always told Cartania. Symbols mattered. He'd understood that, she thought, but only to the extent that there was something under them to give them meaning. He persevered with that delusion for decades, never willing to accept the truth that the surface was all there was. See, she herself had no illusions about the Emperor. He wasn't a god. He probably wasn't even alive anymore. The only thing that mattered was that people believed he was. They had to. Even a flicker of doubt, even a shadow of it, and the game was up. Cynical? No. Realistic. Whatever was necessary. Everything at all or nothing at all. Sanguinius, poor doomed Sanguinius, had known that perfectly. He'd hidden what needed to be hidden and shown what needed to be shown. A proximity indicator blinked to red. Skeva was in the building now, getting closer. Lumen banks flickered on far below her. She looked down to see the giant causeway, one carved through ancient ruins and more recent habitations alike, so that it created a single immense processional corridor through the growing labyrinths of construction. Just as the lumens came on, 1,000 lanterns swayed up from ground level silos, floating in shoals through the toxic atmosphere and turning the smog banks of sullen crimson. Cheering broke out, a surge of sound like the oceans finally coming in across this desiccated world, spilling out of half-finished halves and every semi-complete cathedral. You had to screw your eyes up to see them, the millions of individuals, all crammed across every balcony and viewing station, every landing pad and transitway, so dense and packed together that they looked like they constituted the soil of the planet itself. The cheers went on. They were wild cheers, desperate cheers, cheers of relief and terror and adulation. No coercion had been needed in shepherding those crowds to the viewing platforms. Even the priests with electro slaves had been stationed at the exits. Every roar of affirmation was genuine, bred from a fertile landscape of remembered terror and, just to be on the safe side, constant psychopropaganda. At the terminus of the causeway rose a gigantic pile of granite and rockcrete, a many-layered gargantuan heap of imposing ecclesiarchal excess. Its flanks were floodlit and blazing, its ramparts filled with trenches of wildfire, its pulpits thrumming with vox-amplified recordings of the approved chants. The place was vast, huge, almost beyond comprehension, and still it wasn't finished. Unimaginable sums of coin had been sunk into its foundations, its towers, its clerestories, clear, clear stories, clear stories, and its shadow chapels. Even in its embryonic state, it was grander and more imposing than all but the very greatest buildings of the Unity era Imperium. It didn't even have a name yet, but she knew what it would be called in time. The Cathedral of the Emperor Deified. Deified? In its vaults and catacombs, thousands of young recruits were being trained, being armed, being prepared for their dispersal into the void. Grand devotional paintings were being pored over by gangs of sanctioned artists. Stone was being covered in gold leaf. Censers were being forged. Emperor deified. You could laugh about that if it weren't already becoming dangerous to do so. Even her chambers weren't free of spy devices. A nervous knock rang from the door behind her. "Come," she said, gazing out at the scenes of growing frenzy below. Scavo scuttled in at last, clutching the box to his chest. He shuffled up to stand beside her, looking and smelling worse than he had done when she commissioned him. She glanced down at him briefly, remembering how even the lowliest Legion serfs had been in the fleets, and couldn't help a faint spasm of disgust. "You got it?" she asked. Scavo handed it to her. "The very last one," he said gleefully, anxious to curry favor. She took the she took the box, laid it on a table just next to her. Did you breach the seals? She asked. Oh no, he said, shaking his head vigorously. And it's never been accessed? No, not since it was deposited. Good, you may go. Skevo grinned, sure that he'd given the correct answers, and scampered off. Once he was out of the doors, she activated her security detail and gave them the kill order. Of course he looked. With the trail tidied up, she turned her attention back to the scene below. The moment of climax was almost there. She folded her arms, leaned against the metal rail frame, and watched. The southern front of the great cathedral, the one immediately facing her, was an enormous blank screen of stone, bordered with clusters of columns that held up a soaring entablature of the same material, decorated with more skull icons. Alone in the otherwise heavily lit scene, it remained in total darkness, a coffin-shaped clot of night set right at the center of the fiery expanse around it. The scene was given a mass volley from ranks of Astra Militarum armored station along the causeway's left-hand edge, and more lumens blazed into life. Starbursts went off high above, followed by the blare of war horns from attendant titans. The unlit stone wall flooded with life and color. A 200-meter fresco of Sanguinius battling mega-arachnids, his armor resplendent gold, his spear shining, the Xenos wilting under his steely gaze. For all her cynicism, she couldn't help but swell with pride. It had been one of her best, that depiction. Even Cartenia admired it. None of the crowds would know the precise designation of Xenos in the image. They would understand the message well enough. The protector, the smiter of the clean, the flawless son of the emperor at war. They were now in absolute raptures. The roar was incredible, boiling over from the chasms below and spilling out into the floodlit cloud banks above. Hundreds of thousands were waving, cheering, pressing forward to the railings of their pens, trying to reach out to touch it. Millions would be watching on vid feeds. Billions would see it on propaganda reels sent out to the reconstruction zones. Trillions off-world would pick it up in the months to come, pouring over it around creaking generators and faulty projector rigs. It would spread faster than a disease, more completely than a law, deeper than a command. The idea, the image, the religion, Sanguinius. She remembered the last time she'd seen Cartenia then, the surprise on his face, the amazement that she tracked him down in the wreckage of the Imperium's outer marches. He shouldn't have been surprised. She'd given him fair warning, and no guardians lived forever. Not flesh and blood ones, anyways. She hadn't relished killing him, but it hadn't troubled her much either. Something simply needed to be done. Thinking of that, she turned away from the righteous celebrations and opened the casket Skevo had brought her. Seeing the battered old parchment copy gave her an uncharacteristic pang of nostalgia. They had been so young back then, so full of certainty. She ran an aged finger over the cover, tracing out Cartenia's crabbed handwriting. She turned a couple pages, reading a few extracts. The poison and the cure, bundled up together, impossible to prize apart. She wondered about keeping it. Just one copy. Everything was there, a priceless record of a complex history, one that could be invaluable if strife ever came again. So much had been lost from that age, never to be retrieved, to be the extent that even the basest scraps of connection had become relics of infinite value. And he'd worked so hard on it, both appalled and impressed by what he'd discovered. It was his masterwork, a piece of undoubted quality, for in the brief time he'd spent with the Legion, he got to understand the Primarch more than she'd done over many months, maybe even more so, in some ways, than the Blood Angels themselves. But then she let the pages rustle back together and retrieved an igniter from her cloak. She snapped the seal, tossed it into the metal box, and let the pages burn. She looked out again and permitted herself to enjoy the adulation her own image was receiving. It was beautiful, just as beautiful as he had been in life. Scrubbed clean, impeccable, no doubts, no secrets, just splendor. The Imperium had been all about a kind of truth once, and that had failed. The lie was stronger, and it could be maintained into eternity. This is what you have to be now, for all of us, she said, watching the fires burn higher. Sanguinius, the great angel. And that's it about the author. Chris Wright has written Warhawk, Scars, Leman Russ, the Great Wolf, Jackatai Khan, Warhawk of Trigoris, and then 40K, The Lords of Silence, Vaults of Terror Trilogy, Stormcaller and Hellwinter Gate. Huh. Oh, he also did Bloodlines and works in Bradford on Avon in southwest England. Cool. Kind of weird to say that. An extract. Oh, no. Nope. Not my one. And go to the end and then press done. Cool. And that was Sanguinius the Great Angel. I don't know. It was okay. I think cool action, fun way of finding out that the Blood Angels do, finding out about their curse. That was fun. I mean, it's not like this is anything new. I think this is more just fun lore building. Uh, so, next one I'm going to do is, this is only 43 pages. Holy shit. Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, so we can do Mercy of the Dragon in one go. 43 pages. I think that's bullshit, but okay, I guess. I'll just go fuck myself as a Salamanders fan. It's cool. Yeah. See ya.